Hi, and welcome to a presentation on exploring motivation. Here is our index. We're going to cover an overview, variables on achievement, the nature of motivation, goals, the effects of goals, the role of metacognition, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and instructional implications. And we'll probably fit in a few other things as well. So let's start off talking about variables on achievement. So learning outcomes can be influenced by many different factors, as you very well know. Some of these factors include family variables, including socioeconomic status, the way that the parents raise their child, how involved the parent is with the student's educational process, the student characteristics, such as their natural levels of motivation and intelligence, their cultural background, their ethnic background, where they're from, how they were raised, and then, of course, school variables, such as the curriculum implemented, the instructional practices, and the teaching styles, which can vary from teacher to teacher. So researchers have found that students demonstrate higher levels of achievement if their parents are well educated, if the student is motivated to learn content, and if the teacher covers material found on achievement tests. So as for the first one, this was actually documented in the 1960s during the Coleman Report. They found that if a parent was highly educated, then their child would be better off in the future than a parent who wasn't highly educated. Specifically at the time, they said mother because of the social roles at that time. I imagine it would be any parent who has direct nurturing over that child. So if a parent who has a high level of education, even if they come from a low socioeconomic background, their child will have a higher socioeconomic background than the parent had. If the parent comes from a high socioeconomic background, yet were not highly educated, if they had a low level of education, then their child is likely to have a lower socioeconomic background than the parent. So that's just something I found kind of fascinating. The student is motivated to learn content, meaning the student actually wants to engage in the learning process. And then the teachers cover material found on an achievement test. Now, teachers don't have access to the test. They can't look at the test and see what material will be covered, but we should trust that the material will be represented by our state standards. So learning outcomes can change if the following criteria are met. If students are regularly exposed to opportunities to enhance their skills and knowledge in any domain or content area. So by regularly, I mean they're exposed to multiple opportunities through multiple different ways of learning or engaging with the material. Students have the ability and the motivation to take advantage of learning opportunities, meaning they come to the table with some kind of prerequisite knowledge that they need in order to understand that new material that they're getting, and that they are motivated, they see a reason and a purpose, and they want to learn. And then meaning, a motivated student in an appropriately structured class environment will have academic success. So let's discuss the nature of motivation. Why are some students more likely to take advantage of learning opportunities? Well, there are two components that drive students to take advantage of learning opportunities: their motivation level and their ability level, meaning if students are willing and able, they will take advantage of them. So what is motivation? Well, James Byrnes and Barbara Wasik describe motivation as the theoretical construct that is used to explain the initiation, direction, and intensity of an individual's behavior in a particular situation. So what that means is they have the motivation to initiate the process, they know what direction to push toward, and they have some level of intensity, which can vary depending on the task. So a child who is engaged in a classroom is attentive, willing to learn, actively participating, and curious. And then the motivational constructs. Students who are motivated are, their motivation is goal-related, knowledge-related, and metacognitive. And those three things link together to form motivation. So goals. Goals specify something that a person would like to accomplish by engaging in a particular activity. Goals are cognitive because they are representations of how we want things to be in the future. People control their own behaviors by 1, visualizing outcomes, and 2, performing actions to meet that visualization. So you think about what it is you want to achieve, you figure out what actions you need to take to achieve it, and then you put those actions into place to meet that goal. So for instance, if someone is on a diet and wishes to lose weight, they think about how much weight they want to lose, they visualize the outcome. By the end of this diet, I want to be X amount of pounds. Then they think about the actions that they want to take. So they might eat different types of foods, eat fewer carbs, exercise every other day, whatever their approach is. And then they want to put those things into place with regularity in order to meet that visualization. However, goals can also be impacted by the emotional state of achieving or not achieving the goal. So if they don't reach that goal, it might impact their emotional state in a negative way. So types of goals. So goals can be broken down into 4 dichotomies and 1 trichotomy. So the first dichotomy is learning, aka mastery, versus performance, which is the appearance of competence. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a moment. Another is academic versus social. Some goals are based on academics and others are based on social needs. Proximal, short-term versus distal, long-term. Process, which is focused on techniques or strategies, versus product, focused on outcome. And then the trichotomy is individualistic, competitive, or cooperative. So here's an example of a goal. I want to be fluent in French by 2 years from now. So it's focused on learning. It's about mastering French. Distal, it's long-term because it's got 2 years. Academic, learning, because it's based on developing knowledge in a subject. Product, which is fluency. And then individualistic, so there's no competition or cooperation required in this case. So the side of the dichotomy can affect the success of the goal in certain situations. So students with learning goals, so students who seek to master a skill or knowledge rather than to perform well. They seek out challenging tasks to help them develop mastery, whereas students with performance goals may they want to seem more competent to others. So students who seek to master their topic, they want to learn as much as they can about that skill. They want to develop it as much as they can, and they know that in order to grow, they have to challenge themselves. Students who are focused more so on appearing competent to others are going to want to minimize the risk of failure by practicing with things that they already know how to do, and thus not pushing themselves to grow quite as much. Students with learning goals use teachers as a guide instead of an evaluator and will seek help from their teacher more frequently. So students who have performance goals and see their teacher solely as an evaluator, they're going to see the teacher and their evaluation process as more of a threat because they want to appear competent. So if they approach the teacher in a stage where they're not quite confident with their performance, then they're going to feel like the teacher is evaluating them and they're not prepared. Whereas if they saw the teacher more as a guide to work toward mastery, then the teacher would have a better chance of helping them develop that skill or develop that goal, and the kid would be less likely to be lost in the process. Students with performance goals may care more about what others are thinking than reaching mastery, and be less willing to try in an area they may fail. So as I mentioned before, they will be intimidated by something that they've never done before, and they won't want to fail and others think of them as failures, and so they'll be unwilling to try. And so as a result, they're not going to grow and develop in new areas. And then proximal versus distal. Proximal goals allow for more frequent feedback to help students have a sense of progress and work toward mastery. So distal goals are fine, but they need to have proximal checkpoints along the way to make sure that you have that opportunity for feedback, for evaluation, for reflecting on performance, and for changing approach if necessary. So development of motivation. So knowledge. Students need to know how to reach their goals. They could do that by creating action plans related to their goals. So for instance, in the earlier goal of mastering French, I know that I have several different actions I could take. I could become pen pals with people in France. I could read books in French. I could use websites that are created for the help of helping people learn a different language. And I can set daily or weekly goals to meet in terms of, okay, I want to watch 3 videos in French and work on interpreting the videos, and I want to write reflections in French and, do all of these other things. If I could put them into actionable steps, then I can work toward learning the process or learning the language. Metacognitive. So students should be able to model their progress, monitor their progress, and evaluate their performances accurately, especially in the upper grades. One way teachers can help this is they can provide students rubrics and go over those rubrics with students in detail. They could teach the students the different standards and help them understand what the standards entail. Some of that could go back to like the Marzano rule of thinking, where students have scales that they can evaluate themselves on based on where they are on that scale. And then there's emotional responses, such as personal standards developed by parental and teacher expectations, as well as the comparison to others, can either generate shame or pride. Sometimes we could be our own worst critics, and so we need to be able to see our performance through a more objective lens. Sometimes that means realizing that, hey, even if I haven't reached my goal yet, because I've been working toward it, I know I've gotten better. And that goes back to the whole practice of seeing it as a process that you're trying to master rather than a performance where failure is a problem. Failure should be seen as an opportunity to reflect and learn and get better and continue pushing on rather than something embarrassing. And if you do take it into the place where it's something embarrassing, it's going to discourage you from trying again. So students need to be encouraged to see failure as something, as a part of their learning experience, because everybody is going to fail at one point or other, and there's no reason to feel shame about it. But there is reason to celebrate when you do achieve your goal and to continue to focus on the positives and the strengths, because positive affirmation is a stronger reinforcement than negative. So in the article, Are We Motivating Students with Data by Caitlin C. Farrell, Julie A. Marsh, and Melanie Bertrand, they talked about data chats. And one of the ways that they conducted data chats was they started by conducting or taking data from students through testing. And then the students were taught to evaluate themselves based on expectations and standards, as I mentioned earlier. Then students identified their own areas of strengths and weaknesses, and then students brainstormed ideas to work toward mastery. And this puts the goal, the progress monitoring, the tracking, all in the hands of the student, giving them that sense of autonomy and control over their own learning process, which is a valuable skill to have, something that they could take way later on into the workplace and be able to really realistically evaluate themselves, give themselves the opportunity to improve their performance. So, how to motivate students to read overall. First, you want to encourage mastery. Progress monitoring and student-led data chats can do that. So by teaching students to monitor progress and evaluate their own performances, we teach valuable skills alongside helping them understand teacher expectations. So when I say the valuable skills, again, they could take this into the workplace one day. They could evaluate how they think they've been doing at work, and then they could brainstorm ways to adjust their performance if needed in order to perform better. And then goals, setting goals with students. So this is actually one of my favorite speeches, but Dan Pink's speech on motivation for RSA Animate discusses 3 components of motivation: the possibility of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So in this speech, Dan Pink discusses how extrinsic motivation only works to a certain extent. So if the process involves very basic rudimentary skills, you do this, then you get that type of outcome, then extrinsic motivations are fine. But when it goes beyond that, even just the smallest amount requires extra thinking, then that's when extrinsic motivation not only stops helping, but it also can sometimes demotivate people. So a better way to motivate people would be to implement these three things: the possibility of mastering something, the autonomy to figure out how they're going to approach that mastery, and then a sense of purpose. Why are they doing what they're doing? Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative, and have a great night.